Hello, everyone, and welcome Mary Alice Monroe to the Lowcountry Book Club. We are so excited to have you here. You
Thank
are, of course, one of our very favorite authors in this group. And I'll do a brief introduction, although you certainly need no introduction here. But in case anyone has just wandered in, from elsewhere, we have with us today Mary Alice Monroe, who is the New York Times best-selling author of 27 books, including her latest instant bestseller, The Summer of Lost and Found. Nearly 8 million copies of her books have been published worldwide, and she's earned numerous accolades and awards, including introduction to the South Carolina Academy of Authors Hall of Fame. Welcome, Mary Alice.
Thank you. I love this book club. You're reading all the books I love.
They're all the books we all love. I think that's sort of our common thread here, is that we all love these books. So Mary Alice, you today, as we speak, are in your home in Tryon, and you of course also have your home at Isle of Palms. So you're a dual residency.
I'm a Carolina girl. I just bit my tongue. North and South.
Right. No, I hear you. They both have many wonderful things about them. Before we dive into Last Light, you've recently purchased a pup. Okay, Susan, I'm not speaking correctly today, but we're not starting over.
I bit my tongue. I think there's something in
my mouth is not working. You've recently published a children's middle grade chapter book, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the second in a series. And you have standalone novels, and you have the Beach House series and the Lowcountry Summer series, 27 books in all, which is amazing. Congratulations. When you started this journey, did you ever envision having such a breadth of a catalog?
That's such a great story. No one's ever asked me that. I always knew I'd be a writer. There was never any doubt since I was a little girl, since I knew that was a job. I knew what to say. Okay, I want to be a writer. That's a job. But I remember when I was 16 years old and a woman came into, I was visiting my best friend's house, and her mother came in, and she had a big stack of books, like 6 or 7. And I was always an avid reader. So I dove in and I said, what are all those books? And she looked at me and said, well, they're New York Times bestsellers. What's that? I was like 14. What's that? And she said, well, those are the books that most of the people in the United States are reading. They sell very quickly. And I went, I just knew then. And it's so cocky to say this, but I just knew, not with just a sense of that'll be me someday. And I had that sense that I would write books that would be a lot of books that would be well read. I just knew that was my destiny in an odd, curious way. So when I started writing, it was with a kind of confidence, I guess you might say, that I had stories to tell, and that I hoped people would want to read them. And when it happened, sort of that childhood dream and confidence is different than when you're pounding and you feel insecure because you're pouring your heart out onto the pages. As you know, every book you're sure is your last, and it's so personal. But looking back and listening to you ask me that question, I have to go, I remember.
I always knew I was going to be.
I shouldn't be. It's just, there's a nice part about looking back over a long career and seeing all the stages one goes through. And even now with the middle grade, that's such a joy at this point in my life. There's both a joy and a humility to it, both.
Well, you are amazing, and I am just in awe of everything you've accomplished.
Thank you.
So I loved Last Light over Carolina again. This is one of my favorites of all of your titles, actually. The characters are so real to me. The relationship issues feel like things you might hear a friend talking about over coffee, and the structure is interesting.
I love that. I love when you said that. Thank you.
How did you decide?
With them. Yeah.
How did you decide to set it up as taking place over the course of one day with the flashbacks? That structure is a little bit unique.
It's funny. I'm using it. I forgot that I did that. I'm using it right now in the book I'm writing right now. How amusing that. See how this circumspect. I knew I had just finished a number of the Beach House series books,
Mhm.
and I had been fighting. As my readers know, I've been on the turtle teams front and center for 24 years. And those early days, I was in battles with shrimpers. Sally Murphy had an SCDNR, and it's because of her we have turtle excluder devices on our shrimp boats, and she was my mentor. And I was with her when the shrimpers would burn her in effigy because the battle was so heated.
Oh, wow.
So I was on the other side of that battleground.
Mhm.
But once the shrimpers took on the excluder devices, and they were struggling, they were seeing their industry turn from being king to being paupers.
Right.
And where they are, we're seeing this vanishing industry. My neighbor and dear friend was the president of the Shrimpers Association, and said, Mary Alice, you better write that book about shrimpers y'all are talking about, because it's going to be over soon.
Oh, no.
And I stood there, and I got that. When I get this electrification in my blood, I hear something. It's usually for a species that I know it's time to write about that animal right now. It was that same zzz in my blood that I knew he was right. Because this was 2007, I think, 2008,
Right.
9, somewhere in there. And I knew this is when the last breath of the big industry, Shem Creek was already beginning to change. Boats were already docking. And I knew he was absolutely right. And I felt a sense of loyalty to them because of those early fights. They took on the excluded devices. So they were, in my mind, heroic.
Right.
So I began doing research and talking to shrimpers and going out on the boats in Shem Creek as well in McClellanville. And I knew I had to set it in McClellanville, which is, for those of you listening, it was one of the last coastal villages in South Carolina, where shrimpers actually still lived and had boats. And even though I knew the Magwoods, and he was very helpful to me in Shem Creek, God rest his soul, it was in McClellanville that I could build a community, a town, and at first the shrimpers, I'd show up with out of respect, and you'll get this, Susan, looking like this with my pearls and my purse and my shoes matching. And the shrimpers took one look at me, and they wouldn't talk to me. It was like they had nothing to say to me. So I went, and as is usually the case, I talked to the women. I was introduced. I got into the back door. So I got into the kitchens, like you said. I had coffee with the women, and I heard the stories. And I realized when listening to the stories that that's what I wanted to write about: the family life, what it was like to be inside the home, the hardships. And I said, how can I tell this story? Because over a course of 30 to 50 years, that shift in the shrimping industry happened. So that's when I came across the idea that it would be a marriage, a long marriage, that this young flush of love and excitement, and back when shrimping was king and the men were sexy and it was fun, to the hardships that they endured, to where they're just barely surviving at the end. So that's how it was, really how I do most of my novels with animals. I study the situation. I look at the facts. I look at the romance of it. I look at the hardships. And I think, how can I tell this story in human terms? How can I bring this world to my readers in a way that I can say what I want to say without hitting them over the head with it? So for Last Light, I brought him into a husband and wife's most intimate relationship, their marriage, and that paralleled the shrimping industry in this small town.
Well, it is just beautifully done. And a related question, one of our members, Linda Burrell, asked, Mary Alice, you did all this excellent research of the shrimping life. What did you do? And it sounds like you went to McClellanville and spent time. She says, it sounds like you took many trips out for a catch. how much research did you do? And did you go to McClellanville and spend some time?
Yes. I always fall in love with, I fell in love with McClellanville, wished I could have bought a house there, lived there you fall in love with the people in the community. And Shem Creek, Shem Creek is a tourist spot now.
Right.
And, but back in the day, it's where all the shrimpers were, and the Geechee Boys dock was there. And, I went out on the boats. The hardest thing I did was to go out and do the shrimping, where I get seasick, and everyone who knows me knows it's the nemesis of my life. There's nothing I love more than to be on the water, and I get seasick. So, and I've tried everything, trust me, and I still go out. But when I was out, no matter what I used, when you're in the middle, 50 miles out or less than that, actually, but you're along the coast, and they dock, they put the anchor down, and the diesel fuel is coming up, and the rocking. Then they lower the butterfly nets, and you wait. You're just waiting, and I'm trying to look at the horizon, talking, getting stories, big focus. But when they open up the net, and the shrimp and the bycatch just hits the ground or the deck, and our job with gloves, the guys just use hands, is to separate the bycatch from the shrimp. The shrimp are pretty spiky, and there's a lot, you can really cut your hands in there. The smell. Girls, I have paid my dues.
I'm sure you have.
I went overboard, over the side quite a bit, but I got it done. And it gave me a real respect for the hard work and the labor, but also the romance of it, because it's
right.
Coming back with, going out early along Jeremy Creek. And to me, the most beautiful view in the world, and I've seen a lot of the world, is the marshes. When you're going through the winding creeks to the ocean, and the sun is just rising, there is nothing like it. It's so beautiful.
It makes me want to go out on a shrimp boat, sort of. Maybe another kind of boat.
Any boat will do.
Maybe another boat. I'm not sure about the shrimp boat.
I was just out there last week, and we were fishing, and it got a little rough. And I do go out. It's just that I have to prepare, and it never gets old, no matter what part of the water you're on. There's something about being out in the water that it's good for your soul. It calms you down. While you feel expansive as you take it in.
It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. Okay, so you were in McClellanville, and you were talking to the shrimpers' wives, and you were getting to know them and deciding how you're going to approach the story. Did Carolina's story come to you first? Did you kind of decide this is going to be? Did that character present herself first, and this was going to be her vehicle, or was it more Bud, or was it Lizzie?
It was Bud.
Yeah,
Bud. I knew it was Bud's story. But I wanted to be inside the kitchen too.
Yeah.
But Bud had his what happened with him in the shrimp boat, and the end of the book, which I won't talk about in case y'all haven't finished it yet. How I was going to end the book, I didn't know. That's I think maybe the only book of all the ones I've written where I didn't know for sure what I was going to do at the end. And I had a lot of conversations, but his story arc was the foundation. And then I had to create the family, both the strengths and the weaknesses. And once I understood Carolina, she was a tough nut to crack, very complex. And I wanted her to come from the Greenville area. And because she was South Carolinian, but she wouldn't have known the coastal life.
Right.
And I wanted her to have a different backdrop, so we could have, in a sense, class distinctions between them. What I loved most about Carolina was she loved the water. She was more like me, where she loved the water. She knew she was accustomed to pearls and heels, but she wanted to get out on that boat. And she loved Bud with a great passion. But as anyone who's had a long marriage knows, that passion waxes and wanes as troubles come in and years go by. And I think I brought that to the story.
Oh,
But
yes.
in the end, I think it's because she felt the financial burden of the failing shrimping lifestyle and that brought problems in their marriage that I think once I could speak honestly for her as a
Mhm.
woman. And so she became for me the barometer for writing the novel, the emotions of the novel.
Well, again, character was just so well done. I really found Carolina's story to be very compelling, and Bud's too, of course. And I know he was, the inspiration and the genesis for it. But I had some issues with Bud a couple of times, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, good.
So, in part, this community, this longstanding community with the sense of traditions, that's kind of like another character in the book, and sort of almost the clannishness of the community.
Mm.
Did they? I guess were you able to see that? Did they show you that while you were there, or were they kind of like holding back because of this sense of clannishness or whatever? How did that work its way into the story? And I guess talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it was really clear, the clannishness. I was not invited in at the beginning. It took a while. I mean, by the time I went back to the boats to get on the boats, I was wearing my torn jeans and t-shirts, and I worked my tailbone off because to prove my worth, and
Right.
I kept my mouth quiet and I just listened. That's how you do it, and just worked hard. And I think it was the women who told the men that I could be trusted after a while, and they
Well,
listened to their
I'm
wives.
sure that, after a while they probably had some investment because you were telling their story, or you were trying to tell their stories.
Yeah, Mr. Wayne Magwood in particular was a heroic for me because he had the Winds of Fortune out on Shem Creek,
Mhm.
and the Magwoods were the big fan. That was the Morrison family in my mind, and his father was, what was the grandfather's name? I wanted to play that part of the story up even more, but I just sort of ran out of time. You sort of know how big your story can be before it hits 700 pages. And but it was the whole brother, the lost brother and the father,
Right.
and that whole masculine relationship, and of course PD was
Mhm.
another really
Oh, so
interesting
sad.
character. Yeah,
Yeah,
sad.
sad
And what
story.
happened to him? But the maleness of that community was very true, and the women were circling around them, but they ran the show in many ways, as women often do in families, and the boats were named after them, and they kept them, the men on the boats, and but a lot of marital difficulties in that it's part of the shrimping industry.
And I don't
So
see how they do it. I really don't. I mean, it just seems such a harsh way of life. I mean, just and my knowledge of it consists of what I've learned from you on the pages of
yeah,
this novel. So I
we
don't know,
fought a
but
lot. There's a lot of male camaraderie, which doesn't include the women,
right.
and but especially when they go off in the winters to Florida because they
Mhm.
had to. At one point they didn't have to do that because the shrimp was selling so well and so abundant. But as money got tight, to earn more money, they go to the Florida waters in the winter, and that's just hard on any marriage when there's separation.
Right.
I
So
do
so
think
I'm
I
sorry,
was
go
going to say I
ahead.
do think the clannishness though is partly they're saltwater cowboys. It's a cowboy
Mhm.
mentality.
Right.
And the rugged individualism, just like you see in that Tombstone. Put Tombstone in the water, and you've got this community, and the rough and tumble, and they depend on one another.
Right. So is the problems with that industry that it's basically collapsed and that way of life is going away, is that caused entirely by this influx of shrimp that's produced
I
cheaply
think
elsewhere?
so.
Is that the problem?
I think that was the crux of it. Imported shrimp came in so much more cheap.
Hmm.
And we started, I remember being part of campaigns, friends don't let friends eat imported shrimp. And it was a real push to keep restaurants on. And they've been talking about processing plants for so long. But
Right.
again, together, get a bunch of cowboys to work together. It's kind of hard. So I've never seen it. I've never witnessed it, but it was large, the large number of imported shrimp coming in at such low cost. You couldn't afford to, you couldn't sell your shrimp at a price to be able to fill your tanks
Right.
and go out.
Oh.
And now there's a lot of, it's changing. The dynamics of shrimping is changing. There's a lot of other cultural groups coming in now. So the old shrimp boat captain that I wrote about is a disappearing breed.
Okay, so back to the story, and a big part of that is the challenges of long-term marriage, and that's how you sort of get into all of this. Talk to us a little bit about that, about Carolina and Bud's relationship and how that plays out over the course of their marriage. And I guess if there's something in specific you wanted to say about long-term marriages. I love the quote, the Joseph Campbell quote that you used, and that expressed it very beautifully, but I'll let you talk now.
Which quote did I use?
Marriage is not a love affair. A love affair is a totally different thing. A marriage is a commitment to that which you are. It goes on, but beautiful.
Mm-hmm. That was, I think that quote says it all. To my mind, I enjoyed writing. I have had I'm still in a long-term marriage. I think I wrote this in 2000. What was the date? 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And so I had already been married, close to 40 years, 35, 40 years. And I loved writing. It was very refreshing for me to have Carolina meet this dashing Bud and fall in love. It was that whole experience of the youthfulness, the joy of being out on the water, and I think I did hit it. I really did in their love story, and that they both knew that what they had was special, unique, and they had to fight all odds to be able to be together. Her father was against it. The finances weren't there. Culturally, she had to be accepted into the community. And the later part of the marriage, which opens up the book, they're older when the book opens. Even the toothache, it's like there's a problem. There's pain there. That's why I had that toothache. It was symbolic of this marriage was not going well. And when push comes to shove in all relationships, you know where you stand. And so when Bud's out on the boat and he gets his hand caught in the winch, his life is literally bleeding out of him. And she knows he's out there alone, and that love comes to the forefront, and she's like that tigress who's going to fight for her mate. And I think that strong passion, despite everything, that love when trouble comes in, I think is when humans, but women in particular, really can shine. So I wanted to put her in that position.
Well, it's a lovely story. I love their story. And I love that we're dealing with, married love. It's not like the drama of some off again, on again relationship. Will he, won't he? It's like, it's inside a real marriage, and what it takes to make that work.
And I loved it was difficult for me to do the scene where she is between the two of them and she's accusing him of infidelity. The one who broaches it is her. And that was a difficult decision for me to make, but it was organic to the story. Sometimes I'm very much a structuralist, and I know where I'm going in the story, but every once in a while, your characters take you on a different tour. And that one surprised me, but I knew I had to do it. Right. I knew it had, because it's sort of also, the other part that was exciting to write was the hurricane. Because in actuality, McClellanville and that Lincoln High School, that's all accurate. That flooding in the school
That was
happened.
like the bullseye, wasn't it? Isn't that?
Yes.
Yeah.
There were people in the Lincoln School, and anyone who knows Mary Alice knows she's terrified of hurricanes. I've been through so many. It's like I have PTSD, so I write about them a lot. But that actually happened. Can you imagine standing on the desk with your kids in your arms
I
as
cannot.
the water's rising up?
I cannot.
I had to put that in.
Oh, it's amazing. Okay, so one of the members of our group, and I won't mention any names, Angela May, said, I remember Mary Alice once telling me who she envisioned as the actor to play the shrimp boat captain. If Hollywood ever came knocking to turn this into a movie, ask her who the actor was, and today who else she might like to see play the roles of Bud and Carolina.
Oh, God, yes. Tombstone. What's his name? Kevin Costner.
Oh, yeah.
I saw originally Kevin Costner. Because he's still so good looking as an older man. And yet I thought back then when I wrote it, he was even younger. He could have played maybe a younger Bud. Now we'd need two characters like he does in Tombstone. But when I wrote the book, I saw him as Bud because he could be quite curmudgeon-y. But also, I think any of the Southern male actors, who was in Men in Black,
is it Tommy Lee Jones?
Yes.
Yeah.
He could.
Yeah, I could see that.
He would just have to, he's dark and tall and rugged in the sense that shrimpers are a tough breed, saltwater cowboy. So they'd have to fill that bill. But I think now it's dual timeline. So unless you had one particular actor, you'd have to have two, I think. Right. One particular actor who is versatile, could play young and old, I think it'd be two. Because it is a difference of some 35, 40 years.
Right. No, you'd have to have two for sure. So is there anything on that topic that you'd like to discuss a little further?
Yeah, well, I was talking a little bit before. I don't, a lot of my books have been optioned for film. And I've been in the world of publishing long enough to know that you say thank you for we call it free money when they give you an option. It's not a lot of money for the most part. You get a sofa and you say thank you and they just disappear into the ether. They just don't, nothing happens. But with this one, we are as far as a script. And I've been working on the script with them. And it's been a lot of fun because now it's for TV series. And as opposed to always in the past, it has been a movie where you have to say, what do I leave out?
Right.
Now it's so great when you do a series because what can you add? I can put the grandfather in. I can put Petey's story in because you have, long series to write for. So I'm excited. I hope it happens. I
hope so too. I would love to see that.
Yeah. It's always, you just have to remember that what we do, Susan, you and I, we create the novels. That's what we do. I don't want to write scripts. I'd like to have input, but I have too many novels in my head, like planes. I always say they're planes on a runway. I just have to live long enough to tell them all.
I hear you. Okay, so Wanda Ham asks, do you have a favorite of all your own books?
I do. The Beach House.
Yeah?
It's The Beach House. It's because, I don't know if it's a wonderful book and I'm quite proud of it, but I think the reason I love it so much, it was with that book that I changed the way I wrote novels. I had written 5 novels that I'm proud of before that. But it's when I had moved to Isle of Palms and I became a Turtle team member when all this began, even for this book. And I knew that I was going to write books that brought my reader to the natural world. That was a decision. And I was also going to try to bring awareness to these endangered species, or in this case, shrimping. the industry that was vanishing from the South.
Right.
How do I do that? So I actually consciously revised the way I wrote novels, the way I did research, the way I created themes. And that was The Beach House. That was the first one. And I sort of, with that book that was so successful and still today has a resurgence now, which is both amusing again and humbling. I'm very grateful. It's the book that changed everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
And Lovey is one of my favorite characters. I mean, I think she's the quintessential
Understandably.
Southern women. Yeah.
Actually, we had a contest in the Lowcountry Book Club recently, and I think Lovey was like, we have these Academy Award type awards, best character in a Southern novel, something. Anyway, Lovey won. She won.
Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you. I'll tell her. I'll be sure to tell her. She'll be so grateful.
I'll get you her statue. I have it somewhere.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll put it on top of that little chest, wherever that is. There it is.
So, all right. Now, your latest project, of course, is the Islander series set on one of my favorite places, Deweese Island. And I'm going to bring in Angela May, your co-writer, and we can discuss that a little more in depth. I do have some questions about the Islander series. I'm adding Angela. There we go. Hello,
Hi,
Angela.
Hey, y'all. It's so good to be here.
It's lovely to have you, Angela. Thank you so much for joining us. You're sort of like a bonus surprise. We're in the bonus surprise segment of the interview. So everyone, surprise. Okay. So ladies, tell us about the Islander series. What was the original inspiration?
Well, when we started working on this project more than 4 years ago, Mary Alice and I both have had personal experiences on Deweese Island, and it is a barrier island unlike any other. Most of the time people in Charleston are familiar with spending their time on Folly, Sullivan's Island, Isle of Palms, but what makes Deweese unique is that it's a private community, only accessible by ferry boat, and it's also a nature sanctuary. And I know Mary Alice and I feel the exact same way about every time you step foot on that island. It feels like a completely different world. You don't feel like you are in Charleston County anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like magic. And we wanted to share that with kids. And especially, I know at the time for me, and Mary Alice, you can talk more about this from like a grandmother's perspective, but my kids were young and already they were getting bored with going outside and wanting to explore. And I was scared of them losing that. And so we thought, a book that spotlights the magic of nature, of outside, that's really important today.
And I think the actual why of Deweese, though, in addition to everything Angela just said, is for the storyline, the story had to be someplace that was remote. It was really clear that the motivation was to put them in an area where there would be no internet. And what would be a realistic place to do that? And a like I always say, Lord of the Flies without the violence. And to put the kids testing each other and testing themselves against nature. So Deweese is really the only game in town for that. It's accessible only by boat. There are no stores. And because that's why we created this grandmother who was a bit of a Luddite, and that she didn't believe in internet. So we had to set up a stage for the story of these kids getting to know each other, depending on each other in a place that was remote. And that Deweese was it for us right here. I mean, it was perfect.
Well, it is an amazing place, and I love it. I'd like to go hole up there for a while and write. But
oh yes,
all of us,
all of us,
writers retreat.
Exactly, it's a perfect one, isn't it? And thankfully, they do have internet most of the time, anyway. Okay, so this is the second book in the series, Search for Treasure, which is just out.
Love that cover. Can they see that cover? I just wanted everyone to see how beautiful middle grade covers are. And our artist in particular, Jennifer Bricking, is wonderful. But that's Big Al. The colors, the vibrancy, and the back, show the back. What's unique about middle grade, is there, well, you see a little quote, but it's not all words. You get pictures.
Right.
And that's the joy of the artwork. There's beautiful artwork in the book. Yes,
Ah.
there we go. And she just nailed it. I've seen so many of my covers you look at and you go, oh, this needs work. But this one was out of the park right away. It was just a real pleasure. The artwork is amazing.
And there's also artwork within
inside
the book.
Yeah.
Well. I mean, it's so tastefully spot on done. It's so fun to see how the illustrator imagined the world.
Right. Oh, I think it's amazing. So this is the second book in the series. Are there going to be more of these?
Yeah, we have one coming up. Hopefully, we'll see if it's next year or the year, but we've got one in the works called Shipwrecked. And the idea is that as long as the children read the books, we've been stunned by the response. I mean, to come out the first one, number 2 on the New York Times list. And I think both Angela and I were just giddy with, an excitement and surprise. But I do think when a book hits that high, there's a lot of reasons for it. One of which is it's the right book at the right time.
Right.
Post-COVID, post-isolation, parents, grandparents wanting their children, grandchildren outdoors. How can I show them it's fun, like Angela was saying,
right.
And a good story. And there are very few stories out there that model the behavior of kids having a good time outside without depending on their phones and tablets.
Well, I salute you. And I wish there had been more like this when my kids were younger, because at the time it was all about video games. And of course, our kids did go outside and play. It was long enough ago that was still something they did. But I would have loved to have had a book like this, for them. And I don't think there really was anything at that time. And so, I mean, I think it's fabulous.
But now you have it for your grandchildren.
Exactly. And I cannot wait to share it. And I'm so impressed with both of you. It's just an amazing series.
Oh, thank you. I think what has been really rewarding to hear, and Mary Alice, I didn't expect to get this kind of feedback when the first book came out, but it was wonderful to hear that all of the target audience, the young readers, were really loving Jake, Macon, and Lovey and the whole adventure on the island. But the fact that we've received so many messages from adults who are like, I'm not anywhere close to this reading audience, and I love this story. And that's been really, really cool to see, that the family of multiple generations can enjoy this story together.
And if all the people out there who have read my adult novels, if you love my adult novels, the voice is still in there in middle grade books. It's still the way a story is told. And I really do feel that it's a continuation. Middle grade books are not silly little stories. They really have very important issues. And there's a very strong issue with the grandmother in book 1, The Islanders, and in book 2, the father-son story. So these are profoundly important stories, but it's the word choice, and it's the way, and there's an innocence, I think, to middle grade.
Right. But you would not hold the readers if you weren't telling a compelling story. And obviously you are, and it is a compelling story. And so it attracts readers of a young age, but also readers, as you say, of all ages. So good for family reading, for grandparents and grandchildren, for parents and children, for families. So
I love that phrase, family reading.
Family reading, yeah. Okay, so you have another one of these in the works. Mary Alice, is there another adult novel on the way from you? We have to look.
Well, yes, and I'm very excited about it. In fact, I'm in my office working on it, and I go work on it when I say goodbye. It's
well, we will not keep you.
No, it's funny when you mentioned earlier. It is a reminiscing. It's a one woman's life, an old woman's life, looking back. And in this story, I get to talk about the changes in the South in this last century. And there've been many, and they've been profound. So anyone who loves my adult novels, it's in the South. It takes place in an area between Beaufort, South Carolina, and Charleston. And it has landscape, of course, and it's got a lot of Downton Abbey-ish qualities, which will be fun for the reader. So I think everyone's going to have a good time with this one.
Well, I
It's
can't
actually
wait.
2 books. It's actually
When-
2. I know
Okay.
now it'll be 2.
So when can we look forward to this?
I'm taking my time.
Oh, okay.
I don't feel quite the same rush to get this novel out, but I'm hoping in 24.
Okay. All right. Well,
For
that
us
gives some-
readers, it's not fast enough. But
Exactly.
I will say, I'm not going to reveal anything, Mary Alice, but I will say this. Those little snippets that she shared with me, like when she talks about it, I get goosebumps and I'm so excited.
Thank you, Angela.
So I can't wait to see how it all turns out.
Well, I'm excited now. All right. Well, we're going to let you go get back to work, Mary Alice.
I know. That's why I got circles under the eyes here. I'm under deadline.
No, you don't.
All right. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. This has been so much fun. It's always a pleasure to have you, Mary Alice and Angela. We are so excited that you came in today to discuss the Islanders with us too. And
Angela's hard at work on
bonus.
the Islanders, on Shipwrecked. Angela's hard at work writing too.
Oh, well, you both have work to do. Actually, we all have work to do. So anyway.
Back to writing, ladies.
Yeah, I know.
Well, we'll
And
see
so
you
is there
next time when we
anything-
have another book, Susan. We can chat again.
Yes, we will. I cannot wait. Is there anything I have not asked the two of you that we should know? I always like to ask that last in case I've forgotten anything. No? All right.
I just have to say, I love that you have this wonderful book club to discuss our books, to get people to the excitement of reading. There's nothing, I personally agree, there's nothing quite like a Lowcountry novel. I mean, do we not live in the most beautiful place? So let's celebrate it with words.
You're here. Thank you so much.
And protect our landscape.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both for joining us so much. It's been lovely to see you, ladies, and I will look forward to chatting with you both further soon.
Thank you, Susan.
You.
Hi,
Take care.
Angela. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Happy reading, everybody.